Hi everyone, in this video I just found out that Miles Morales is not an anomaly and Miguel is not who he claims to be, because he is not even a real Spider-Man, and I fully broke down Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. What secrets are behind this movie? Is Miguel O'Hara an actual imposter? You will find it out right now. The movie starts with a black screen, during which the escalating music is accompanied by coughing. This is a traditional joke by the creators of the animated film, Chris Miller and Phil Lord, who pulled off the same trick in Into the Spider-Verse. This cough belongs to Chris Miller himself, and it's obviously inserted to convey to the audience the atmosphere of a cozy movie theater. Then the studio logos appear, which begin to glitch just like in the first film, but much stronger, as the Spider-Verse is in an unstable state after the Collider reactor explosion in the previous animated movie's finale. While the Sony Pictures animation logo is glitching, you can notice references to the Spider-Man comics, the 8th issue of Marvel's Secret Wars, and the 300th issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, where Venom made his debut. Then, the sticker approved by the Comics Code appears on the screen, which already appeared in Into the Spider-Verse. Essentially, this is censorship. For many writers, it has become a symbol of violating one of the main freedoms, freedom of speech. The movie then moves on to the origins of the two main characters, Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy. Miles' story is simply a retelling of the previous film, whereas Gwen's origin is much more interesting. In Earth 65, a genetically modified spider beat Gwen Stacy instead of Peter Parker, and she became Spider-Woman, while Parker remained a loser. Eventually, Parker created a serum that turned him into the Lizard, and in this form, he attacked his school. Gwen, unaware that it was Peter, stopped the Lizard, but Parker died in the battle, something she couldn't forgive herself for. Her father, Captain Stacy, believed that Spider-Woman killed Peter and began to hunt her down. This backstory closely mirrors the origin of Gwen Stacy, a Spider-Woman from the second issue of the comic Spider-Verse, where this character debuted. The creators even took several illustrations from this comic to accompany the canonical event of the Spider-Bite. The universe number of Gwen, 65, is a reference to Gwen Stacy's first appearance in comics, which took place in issue 31 of The Amazing Spider-Man in 1965. When they show us the universe number, there is a footnote at the bottom with an explanation, just like they usually use in comics. Gwen recalls her backstory while playing drums at a rehearsal with the Mary Jane's band. This is indicated by the logo on the drum, which you can notice. This band also comes from the comics, where it was founded by Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy, and later joined by Glory Grant and Betty Brant. They are probably the ones we see in this frame. Interestingly, one of their tracks, Face It Tiger, can even be listened to in real life, as Marvel teamed up with the band Married with Sea Monsters, who recorded a track for the comic under that title. This name comes from the canon and refers to the nickname Mary Jane called Peter in both comics and movies.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
On the drum with the band's name, you can see the name of the educational institution, Visions Academy, the same place where Miles attends school in his dimension. In the flashbacks, Gwen shows Peter photos of the Spider-Woman, indicating that in this universe, she also makes money by selling her superhero photos to the Daily Bugle newspaper. The visual style of Earth 65 deserves a special mention, as it mimics watercolor drawings, with colors reflecting the hero's emotional state. This style was created by the original comics artist for Gwen, Robbie Rodriguez. This pays homage to him. As Gwen walks the streets of New York, the drawings and background colors precisely replicate the cover of the first issue of the Spider-Gwen comics arc. At the Stacy's house, Peter defends Spider-Woman from Gwen's father, leading to an argument, which closely resembles the scene from The Amazing Spider-Man. If you pause the scene at the dinner table, you will notice a frame where Peter wears the same shirt he wore in Spider-Man the Animated Series. A moment later, there is also a shot of Peter in a lizard costume. It seems he had a thing for reptiles, which might explain why he used their DNA in his serum, turning him into the lizard. We also get to see Aunt May and even Uncle Ben, who remains alive in this universe. The bully bothering Peter is none other than Ned Leeds. Unlike in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they were never friends in the canon. Both Peter and Ned worked at the Daily Bugle and competed for Betty Brant's attention. But on Earth 65, Ned's biography is clearly different, as he serves as the local version of Flash Thompson. While we don't see if the Daily Bugle exists in Earth 65, we still hear the voice of the familiar editor, J. Jonah Jameson, voiced by the legend J.K. Simmons. At Gwen's house, there are also several interesting details. We see her father, Captain Stacy, wearing a shirt with the worn-out logo of Visions Academy, indicating that he also attended this school. On the wall above the drum set hangs a poster of the Ultimate Fallout group, another comic reference. The first appearance of Miles Morales was in the fourth issue of the Ultimate Fallout comic series. On the shelf, there is a poster that reads "Need more punk," which is ironic, because for the next 6 months, Gwen will constantly be hanging out in the Spider-Punk universe. Gwen keeps her superhero costume inside the drum, where there's also a joint photo with Miles, and a box with a note saying "Happy birthday from your mom." The story doesn't tell us what happened to Gwen's mother, but it seems she passed away, since her father and daughter live alone. It seems Gwen still hasn't opened her mom's gift. When Captain Stacy arrives at the museum, you can notice his car's license plate, RFD 960. The same number was on Miles' father's petrol car in Earth 1610, which references the TV show Law and Order, where the main cops had the same plate on their car. Arriving at the scene, Captain Stacy meets an officer called Yuri, so undoubtedly it's Yuri Watanabe, who at the moment has only appeared in Marvel's Spider-Man video games. Next, we found out that the Vulture who attacked the museum came from another dimension that looks like Leonardo da Vinci's sketches. Even the Vulture himself in this universe is called in an Italian manner, Adriano Tumino. Also, as a reference to Italian culture, he wears a mask from Italian street theaters. This type of mask was inspired by the Plague Doctor mask, which the Vulture wears before breathing fire. The choice of the villain is not accidental, as in the comics, it was the Vulture who became the first enemy of Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman. Inside the museum, you can notice an exhibition by one of the most popular contemporary artists, Jeff Koons, known for sculptures in the form of balloon animals. First, after the Vulture's attack, basketballs from his iconic sculpture 3 Balls Total Equilibrium tank, worth millions of dollars, jump into the frame. Next to the sculpture hangs famous inflatable lobster, and in the next scene, the heroes knock it down, along with an inflatable dolphin test trash can, thereby causing millions of dollars in damage to the museum, which Gwen notices and asks the Vulture to stop smashing the artworks. After that, he decapitates Koons' most famous sculpture, the inflatable poodle, from which many copies of the same poodle spill out, which is also a reference, as according to Koons himself, his inflatable dogs contain secrets, but they are worth millions of dollars, and no one but the Vulture would dare to break them. The villain manages to defeat Gwen, but she is saved by Miguel O'Hara. When Gwen first meets him, she tries to guess his nickname.
You're the Blue Panther.
No.
The Clark Garfield.
No, stop.
Macho Libre.
I'm from another dimension.
You are?
These are nods to Black Panther and Garfield the Cat, which obviously came to Gwen's mind because of Miguel's sharp claws, like a cat's. Then Spider-Man 2099 tells his backstory, like all the other Spideys did in the first movie, and you can see that his comic, Spider-Man 2099, is on top of the Into the Spider-Verse hero comics. However, unlike them, Miguel doesn't tell his origin. By canon, Miguel O'Hara was an employee of Alchemax, a company that tried to create its own superheroes, and they built a special machine to splice genes of different species, but their experiments failed. Then Miguel decided to quit, but one of the employees got him hooked on a drug called Bliss, which only that company legally distributed, so Miguel stayed at Alchemax. To get rid of the addiction, O'Hara conducted a genetic experiment on himself, after which he gained superpowers, but then he quit and went on the run, and he started to be pursued. Well, in the movie we see that Miguel lacks spider sense, because he doesn't react at all when Vulture is behind him. Then Miguel explains to Gwen that after the collider explosion by Kingpin in the first movie's finale, a hole formed in the space-time, through which heroes and villains are thrown between universes. He and a team of spider people are trying to restore order in the multiverse, but not only Gwen and Miles are to blame for this multiversal madness, but also Doctor Strange and Peter Parker from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's interesting that he calls the Marvel Cinematic Universe Earth 1999-99.
Don't even get me started on Doctor Strange, you little nerd back on Earth 1999-99.
This world was numbered like that before, but with the launch of the Multiverse Saga, it became officially known as Earth 616, that is the main universe from the comics. However, in Into the Spider-Verse, they mention that 616 is the universe number of Peter Benjamin Parker, so obviously each spider reality has its own Earth numbering. During the battle, we see Vulture regrow on his severed wing, and Miguel says he is using hammer space. It's a clear reference to Spider-Ham, who kept a huge hammer in his pocket. We are shown Miguel's comic book sidekick, an artificial intelligence, Lila, who canonically went berserk and tried to kill Miguel's wife, but here she is the opposite, getting on Miguel's nerves, so he tries to grab her. After that, she takes a selfie with him, which viewers in theaters might have missed, because that moment wasn't in the theatrical version. After the release of Across the Spider-Verse, many viewers noticed that theaters were showing different versions, and Chris Miller explained that they had to submit the international version to the ratings board before the team finished polishing the film, so theaters showed a rougher version, as we will see later on. Lila convinces Miguel to call for help in the form of a pregnant Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, who bursts into the battle on her motorcycle. Her appearance is clearly inspired by the very first Spider-Woman in Marvel Comics. We see Vulture attacking a police helicopter, which crashes right into the museum, but the heroes manage to stop it, and one of the visitors says,
"Yeah, I think it's a Banksy."
The same reference was in the first movie, where, because of a reality glitch and Kingpin's collider, a bunch of stuff appeared on the New York streets, and someone said the same line.
"I think it's a Banksy."
By the way, that's Post Malone's voice. It's also a nod to real events, because in February 2023, at a modern art museum in Miami, a visitor accidentally broke a mini version of Kun's inflatable dog, which became the highlight of the exhibition, because many thought it was a stunt like Banksy's. The heroes catch Vulture, and Captain Stacy finds Gwen exhausted and tries to arrest her. She decides to take off her mask, but even revealing her identity doesn't stop her principal dad from doing his duty. Then Jessica convinces Miguel to accept Gwen into their Spider Society. The three of them go through portals, which have appeared in Marvel movies before, symbolizing space travel. But then we are thrown into Earth 1610 and shown a comic screen about Miles Morales to make it feel like we finished Gwen's story and now opened Miles. There is a number 2 drawn in the top left corner of the comic, hinting that Across the Spider-Verse is the second story about animated Miles Morales after Into the Spider-Verse. In Brooklyn streets, you can't miss the graffiti saying Steve Sweatpants. It's a nickname for the famous Brooklyn photographer Stephen John Irby, who is a Sony ambassador, and on the basketball court there is graffiti listing the last names of people who worked on the movie, basically like credits. In the next scene, you might spot a booth from a company called Mother Shuckers, which came from real New York to Earth 1610. It's a popular oyster joint, and they sell them from similar booths. The writing on the truck confirms it's an alternate universe. It says RedX and not to FedEx. While Miles' parents are in the counselor's office, you can spot a badge with the name Morales, which is interesting because Morales is his wife's last name, but his last name is Davis. And that's what was on the badge in the first movie. So it seems he took his wife's last name over time, maybe because he didn't want to be associated with his brother Aaron Davis, who turned out to be a crook known as the Prowler. Miles is late for the meeting because he tried to stop a robbery by a new villain called Spot. Notice that when Spot looks at the cameras, you can see the current date, July 11, 23. Later, from the villain's monologue, we learn that it's been just over a year since the events of Into the Spider-Verse, although in reality there is a 5-year gap between the movies. On the cashier's desk at the store Spot robs, there is a sign that says Game Over, and an arrow nearby seems to point to Spot, hinting that this villain will be the toughest for Miles. In the comics, Spot first appeared in issue 97 of the Peter Parker The Spectacular Spider-Man, where he was also a scientist named Dr. Jonathan On, who worked for Wilson Fisk and tried to artificially create superhero abilities. He succeeded in creating a portal that transported him into a dimension filled with other portals, one of which brought him back to our world. But during the transition, his body changed drastically, his skin turned white, and he was covered in small portals, turning him into the villain known as Spot. It's funny that when Miles meets Spot, he starts laughing, just like Peter Parker's reaction in the comics. Spot uses his powers to rob an ATM, which holds $100 bills, with the portrait of an unknown young man, reminding us again that this is a different universe, because in our world, Benjamin Franklin is depicted on them. Spot fails to steal the money, because they are held by a special mechanism, labeled thief-proof, which means protected from thieves. Miles tries to stop him, and they get into a fight. During the fight, Spot throws a taxi at Spider-Man, and you can see the license license plate TT1207, which stands for Throwback Thursday, and the date December 7. Throwback Thursday is usually attached to nostalgic posts on social media, which is very symbolic, because 5 years ago, on December 7, was the very first screening of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The move of apprehending a car above a crowd of civilians is a classic, just like when Tobey Maguire stopped a flying police car in Spider-Man 2. Miles takes a moment to tell viewers about the past year, illustrated with sketches. You can spot a few villains he has already faced: Hammerhead, Frogman, Beetle, and Grizzly. The scene showing sketches of Spider-Man's new suit reminds us of how Peter Parker created his suit in Spider-Man from 2002. Among the sketches, there is one that looks a lot like the suit Miles used in the Spider-Man Miles Morales game. He also mentions that Aunt May moved to Florida, and on the moving sign with "Sold" written on it, you can see the realtor's name, which is Mary Jane's mom, Madeline Watson. In just a year of superhero action, Miles has become famous, even making it on Into Jeopardy, with all the questions about spider stuff. Miles also promoted baby powder, and not to Peter Parker's advice in Into the Spider-Verse.
You're gonna want to use baby powder in the soup, heavy on the joints, you don't want any chafing, right?
It's clear how Spider-Man is commercialized on Earth 1610, as the powder ad uses Uncle Ben's famous line, "With great powder comes great responsibility," but nobody seems to like that ad, so Miles had to publicly apologize. And you can see the apology video got 69 million dislikes out of 10 million views, with one viewer commenting, "Old Spider-Man didn't need baby powder." J. Jonah Jameson, in his show Triple J, calls Spider-Man a threat in his classic style, and the headline reads, "New Spider-Man, same old menace." During Spider-Man's fight with Spot, Miles gets distracted by a message from his dad, who misspelled important, referencing Spider-Ham, Peter Porker. The hero and villain then end up in Hipster Cafe, Foam Party, mentioned in the first movie by Jeff.
Foam party? Come on. And everyone is just lining up. You see that, Miles?
See it.
Since they transitioned there from a car wash, the cafe is filled with soap bubbles, justifying its name. Finally, Miles uses his spatial thinking and connects Spot's limbs between portals, reminiscent of how Spider-Man linked Doctor Strange in No Way Home. But when Miles pats Spot on the head, a caption appears saying "Good call," mocking the villain's appearance. Then Miles returns to his dorm, and before turning the corner, he stops and waits for pigeons to fly by, referencing a scene from Into the Spider-Verse with pigeons. We see Miles' neighbor, Ganke Lee, playing Marvel's Spider-Man, and above Ganke's bed hangs a poster of a South Korean soccer player, known for celebrating his goal by doing Spider-Man's gesture. By the way, Tom Holland even interviewed him. Above the desk, you can see the cover of the comic 7 Deadly Sins, which in this universe is called 7 Deadly Twins. Miles still manages to make it to the meeting with his parents and curator. During the interview, it turns out that Miles has a C in Spanish, which his mom doesn't like because she is from Puerto Rico, where Spanish is spoken, and when she snaps her fingers, you can even see a small copy of the Puerto Rican flag. Meanwhile, Spot manages to break free, so Miles runs away again, and then his dad also gets called into work for the same reason. During another fight between Spider-Man and Spot, they end up at the Alchemax factory, which has been rebuilt after the Collider explosion in the finale of Into the Spider-Verse. At one point, Spot throws portals at Miles, and he dodges them just like Maguire's Spider-Man dodged Green Goblin's blades. And there is a funny parallel scene where Jefferson Davis wants to jump into one of the portals, but changes his mind at the last moment and takes the stairs, exactly like a scene from the first movie, when Miles hesitated to jump off the building. Next, Spot tells Miles his origin story, explaining that he worked at Alchemax on the Collider and conducted a test, during which the spider that beat Miles landed on Earth 1610. In this flashback, you can see the spider in a school next to a teenager with dreadlocks. And as we know from the finale, this is an alternate version of Miles, so this is the moment when Spider was supposed to bite him, but due to the Collider experiment, the spider ended up in another universe. Spot holds a grudge against Miles, because he threw a bagel at him when he and Peter Parker were escaping from Alchemax in the previous movie. The confrontation ends when Spot falls into one of his portals and ends up in a dimension with wormholes, leading to different universes, and the villain begins to explore different worlds, first landing in a universe that looks like classic 40s comics, using Bay-Day dots. Next, the hero lands on Earth 1312-2, which is the Lego dimension. Interestingly, this segment of the film was created by a 14-year-old YouTuber who recreates scenes from movies using Lego sets on his channel. His videos impressed the film team so much that they invited him to work on Across the Spider-Verse. Shortly after, in the Lego universe scene, J. Jonah Jameson appears, and his voice line is directly taken from Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie.
Get out of here! Get out of here!
Another reference to the Raimi trilogy can be seen immediately after, when Peter walks past a Lego piece with a Daily Bugle print about Otto Octavius, who appeared in Spider-Man 2. The next universe Spot lands in is the Sonyverse, which is numbered 688, and we see the shop owner next to Eddie's house. She is not surprised at all by the appearance of the cartoonish monster, as she is apparently used to Eddie's transformation into Venom. Then Spot steals a gum called Venomint from her, clearly referencing the alien symbiote. After traveling through different universes, Spot says,
"The power of the multiverse in the palm of my hand."
repeating a line from Dr. Octavius in Spider-Man 2.
"The power of the sun in the palm of my hand."
As for Miles, after dealing with the villain, he heads to a party celebrating his father's promotion. On the way, he stops for 2 cakes and has to take them on the subway in his superhero suit. This is reminiscent of the fast travel loading screens from Spider-Man games. Along the way, he encounters the villain Armadillo, one of Spider-Man's most absurd enemies. And then Morales prevents a theft from the Sneedsbury shoe store, where you can see a bearded man on the sign. This is a cameo of one of the Sony animation artists, who collects sneakers and creates comics about them. After talking with his parents, Miles returns to his room, where you can spot lots of interesting details again. Hanging on the doorknob are boxing gloves, reminding us of how Miles used to box with his uncle Aaron. On the right side of the door, there is a sticker with Michelle Obama's name, suggesting that in this universe she ran for president and won instead of her husband, Barack Obama. On the shelf to the right, there is Spider-Mobile from the comics. Peter used it for a while, until he accidentally sunk it. Above the bed, there is a poster for Muhammad Ali's book, The Way of Butterfly, referencing his famous quote, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." Next to it, there is a poster for the Top Skater, skateboarding simulator for PlayStation 1, a nod to the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game series, where Spider-Man was even a playable character. By the window, there is a vinyl record from the rap rock group Beastie Girls, an alternative version of the Beastie Boys, except in Miles' universe, the band members are girls. In Miles' diary, next to an image of Gwen, you can see a ticket stub from the bus they took back to New York from Alchemax Tech campus, the same bus where Miles and Gwen first had a scene for each other, so it's no wonder he keeps the ticket. Then, Gwen herself appears in Morales' universe, repeating the final scene from Into the Spider-Verse. As she opens the portal, scenes in the room start to float, and you can spot the 15th issue of the Amazing Fantasy comic, where Spider-Man first appeared, which was also featured in the first movie. Miles is wearing a t-shirt with the number 42, another reference to the universe where Spider that bit him came from. On Gwen's sweater, there is an interesting Easter egg, Eye of Providence, which in case refers not to the Masons, but to musician Metro Boomin, who produced the soundtrack for this movie. It's the logo of his label, Boominati Worldwide. Then the heroes go for a walk in New York and swing by a construction site, using webs to grab onto cranes, just like Andrew Garfield did in The Amazing Spider-Man. Throughout this scene in New York, there are various graffiti tags, all of which are the names of the creators of the movie. For example, on a stop sign, you can see the name Bendis, referring to Brian Michael Bendis, the creator of Miles Morales. In the next frame, on the left, there is a sign for arcade games, with arcade written in Cyrillic, and its name, Zelensky Ball, clearly refers to the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Even the colors of the sign are yellow-blue. And right above the sign, you can spot the Russian flag. On their way, the spiders grab hot dogs from a street cart, and Miles pays the vendor with $25 bills. This little detail again reminds us that Miles' universe is different from ours, because we don't have $25 bills. And the scene itself, with the fast food theft, is very similar to a scene from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, where Parker also grabs a slice of pizza. Gwen mentions that one of the Spider Society's missions took place in the Shakespeare dimension, a clear reference to the Avengers of Shakespeare, which retells the events of all the Avengers movies, as if they were Shakespearean plays. After that, we found out that Gwen came to this Earth to track down Spot. She sets up a spider bot, and at that moment you can spot a mysterious banner with a bagel on it, saying all of it always all over the place. Judging by the bagel, it's a local version of Everything Everywhere All at Once, but not in movie format, but as a stage play, as indicated by the inscription above. 7-time Tony Award winner. The Tony Award is a prestigious American award for theatrical achievements, but on the poster with the number below, you can see a reference to Miles and Peter Parker's universes, 1610 and 616. Then we see Gwen and Miles stopping at a clock tower, which very much resembles the one where Gwen died in the finale of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So she tells Miles that in every universe Gwen Stacy falls in love with Spider-Man, and in every universe it ends badly, which is true, because Gwen lost Peter in her universe, and in the original comic, the night Gwen Stacy died, she was killed by the Green Goblin, which was later repeated in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Then after the party on the Morales rooftop, Gwen runs off again to search for Spot, and Miles follows her, and ends up in Jonathan On's apartment, where you can see his photo with Olivia Octavius from the first movie. Inside the room, you can also see a scientist's workspace, with containers containing spiders from different dimensions. Here you can see the dead spider from Universe 42, the spider that beat Penny Parker on Earth 14512, a container with the universe number of Spider-Man Noir 9214, and here's also the universe number 19925, which was written by the bot, and Reality 3123, where the spider beat Aunt May. And then we head to Mumbai, Earth 5101, the universe of Indian Spider-Man, Pavitr Prabhakar, from the Spider-Man India comics. Mumbai, as you might have guessed, is a blend of the financial center of India, Mumbai, and the New York borough of Manhattan. Here you can notice an Indian version of Dunkin' Donuts, a poster for the movie Secret Wars, obviously referring to Marvel's Secret Wars, an ad for the real Indian food delivery service, Zomato, and the Vadivala snack bar, which parodies a fast food chain in India called Rohit Vadivali, which is also confirmed by the similar logos. And when Miles drops Gwen and falls into the local version of Times Square, behind him you can spot an ad for Joe's Paratha, which is a local version of the famous Joe's Pizza where Peter Parker worked in Sam Raimi's movie. When Pavitr tells Miles about Mumbai, he says,
This is where the British stole all of our stuff!
And this is a reference to real events, because when India was a British colony, the British managed to take out goods worth $45 trillion from the country, reducing India's share in the world economy from 23% to 4%. We see Spot reaching the local version of Alchemax, which built its own collider to harness dark energy. To stop the heroes, he activates an energy barrier, which Miles tries to disable using his bioenergy, but unsuccessfully. But the situation is saved by Spider-Punk, Hobie Brown from Earth 138, which is done in the format of a collage animation, reminiscent of the style of the album by the British punk rock band Sex Pistols. On his leather jacket, you can notice the spider symbol with the letters FNSM, which stands for Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Spider-Punk debuted in the 10th issue of the 3rd volume of The Amazing Spider-Man. He gained his abilities from a radioactive spider that mutated due to the release of toxic waste by President Norman Osborn. Hobie tells Miles,
advice. Use the palm, not just your fingers.
And Miles uses this advice a little later, when he escapes from the laser cell in the spider community. It is also noteworthy how Spot grabs the spiders jumping out of his portals. Just like in Infinity War, Thanos caught Parker when he jumped out of Doctor Strange portal. In the end, Spot destroys the Alchemax building with his portals and manages to escape, while the heroes are busy saving civilians. Miles saves Inspector Singh, a father of Pavitr's beloved, breaking the canonical event. Well, Gwen, Miles and Hobie head to the Spider headquarters to meet Miguel O'Hara, and here begins the most Easter egg-filled scene, as we see a place where hundreds of versions of Spider-Man from different universes appearing in comics, games and animated series have gathered. One of the first versions of Spider-Man that Miles meets in the Spider Society headquarters is Malala Windsor from Earth 835, who didn't appear in the comics and was created specifically for Across the Spider-Verse. That's why there is a caption with the hero's name and the nickname Spider-Britain that indicates that we are dealing with the version of Billy Braddock, Spider-Britain, who in turn was an alternative version of Captain Britain, and the surname Windsor hints the cheese of royal blood, as in our universe the Windsors are the current royal dynasty in Great Britain, to which Queen Elizabeth II belongs. As the heroes walk through the lobbies, among the versions of Spider-Man flashes a variant in a black suit. This is Bruce Banner from the Bullet Points comics arc, where Peter Parker turned into the Hulk and Dr. Banner tried to cure him, but was bitten by a radioactive spider in the process. And then, when the hero exits the lobby, you can just notice a bunch of Spider-Man variants. There's a spider in the Mark II armor that Peter made after losing his spider sense and needing protection from bullets. A little further, you can notice Peter Parker's wife and daughter from Earth 1811-9, Mary Jane and Anna May Parker in their superhero outfits. They came from their New Year Wow story arc, where MJ and Peter had a daughter, Anna May Parker, who inherited her father abilities. When she grew up, she started helping her dad fight crime, so Peter created a costume for Mary Jane that gave her the same abilities as him, so she also became a superhero. Next, you can notice a spider in a police uniform, regulating traffic. The joke came from the Marvel Spider-Man video game, where Peter called himself a cop spider.
Spider cop.
While working with the police captain Yuri Watanabe, and during one of the missions, he called himself Spider Traffic Cop.
This looks like a job for Spider Traffic Cop.
And it turned out that in one of the universes, such a hero really exists. To the left of the Spider Cop, you can see anime Spider-Man, who appeared in the Marvel Mangaverse Spider-Man comics series, where he was a member of the Spider Clan. Above the Spider Cop, you can see a lion hero, who with his paws and yellow jacket resembles Tom Holland from the poster of Spider-Man Homecoming. The girl with mechanical claws is Mabel Riley, known as Lady Spider. She was a superhero who designed her own costume with claws and web shooters. Below, you can also see Captain Spider from one of the What If comics, where they tell us what would happen if the radioactive spider beat Flash Thompson. Spoiler, he would just die in a fight with Vulture, because he didn't even come up with web shooters. But in one of the universes, Flash still managed to survive and become a superhero. Underneath him, you can easily recognize Bagman Spider-Man. He appeared in one of the comics, where Peter, after getting rid of the symbiote suit, borrowed one of the Fantastic Four suits from Mr. Fantastic to get home. But since he didn't have a mask, Johnny Storm gave him a regular bag, but the suit looks a bit different from the canonical one, because Sony doesn't have the rights to the Fantastic Four. A few seconds later, a Spider-Man in the Mark III armor passes by the heroes, which Spidey used to fight the Sinister Six. Then there is a cameo of Spider-Mobile, named Peter Parked Car. Several familiar Spider variants sit in the car. The one in the red jacket behind the wheel is Spider-Man who appeared in the storyline Happy Birthday, as a potential future version of Peter Parker, and then he became a separate Spider variant. This version of Peter Parker killed Kraven the Hunter out of revenge for the death of his friends, pushing the hero onto the path of cruelty. Right in front of him on the frame, you can see Lego Spider-Man, which was shown earlier. Next to him, Tarantula sits in the passenger seat. Judging by the costume and several arms, this variant is taken from the Ultimate Spider-Man issue 100, where he appeared as a clone of Peter Parker, created by Otto Octavius and Ben Reilly, another Peter clone. In the comics, there were many versions of Ben Reilly, and one of them can be seen right in this scene, Spider-Side. This clone was created by the villain Jekyll to kill the real Peter Parker, MJ and two other clones, so for a while he was portrayed as a villain who could shape-shift and brutally deal with his enemies. However, later he turned to the path of good. Interestingly, the hero's name window indicates that he's from the main Earth 616, just like Peter Benjamin Parker's version, so this is his clone. Another clone created by Jekyll can be seen just ahead. His name is also Ben Reilly. He is known as Scarlet Spider. Throughout many comics, he suffered from an identity crisis, because he first thought he was the real Peter Parker, but then found out that he was actually a clone. This is exactly what the authors left at, showing us his suffering from painful memories of the past. By the way, during Miles' escape, you can notice another version of Ben Reilly, the red and black one, known as Kane Parker. Before entering the prison area, Miles encounters Patrick O'Hara. He was bitten by a spider that got into the elixir bought by Dr. Morbius. This spider also bit Patrick's horse, Widow, so she also gained abilities. But after entering literally packed with different versions of web slingers, the heroes end up in a prison, where versions of classic spider villains are kept. The very first one introduced to us is the villain nicknamed Grizzly, or more precisely, his third version from the comics, Maxwell Markham. He was a professional wrestler, until an article in the Daily Bugle ruined his career, so he used exoskeleton in the form of a bear's skin to get revenge on J. Jonah Jameson. However, Spider-Man stopped him. In the cage on the left is Beetle. She is Janice Lincoln, who in the comics was the daughter of Tombstone. Behind her, you can see the villain Big Man. He was a Daily Bugle reporter named Frederick Foswell, who secretly was the boss of a criminal organization. In the cages a bit further are different versions of Dr. Octavius, one of which looks particularly creepy. He wears a pirate costume, and from his back grow a real living tentacles with snake heads on the ends, while you can also notice snakes on his head, as if he were Medusa. Apparently, he is also a cyborg, since his eyes glow. After Octavius, Lila introduces us to Mysterio from the Spider-Ham universe. This is a very subtle Easter egg, because Mysterio appeared in the comics only once, on a collectible posters. That is, he was never a full-fledged character, but the female version of Mysterio, who is in the neighboring cell, has never appeared in the comics. However, her name sounds like Miss Ace, Stereo. Then comes some very little known villains. The first one is Video Man from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, specially created for this animated series. Initially, he was a character from a video game until Electro revived him to defeat Spider-Man. In the adjustment cell is the Green Goblin from the very first Spider-Man video game, released in 1980. Between the two pixelated villains stands Spider-Man from the Marvel Spider-Man video game. Here his Earth number is revealed, 1048. Next, we are shown a lesser known Marvel villain named Typeface, whose body bears letters written in different fonts. He is a Vietnam War veteran who went insane due to letters after his family left and began wreaking havoc on the streets of New York. As we see further, including such a strange villain in the movie allowed the creators to use several puns at once. Thomas tells Miles, "Go to Helvetica," Helvetica being the name of a font, the first letters of which sound very similar to the word hell, so he's basically saying go to hell. Miles responds with another pun, saying he ended up bold, which refers to a bold font in text documents. You can see that his response is visualized using this font. The word Helvetica also uses its font, and Spider-Man with the famous font used in Sam Raimi's trilogy, but after the boring Rhino, as Lila calls it, because it's actually the real Rhino, obviously accidentally ended up in another universe. Miles sees his uncle Aaron as a Prowler, and this is his movie version, played by Donald Glover, who has already appeared as Aaron Davis in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Spider-Man Homecoming. This could mean that the Prowler is already operating in the MCU, and during the events of No Way Home, he ended up in another universe, just like the Vulture. But since they will now return him to his universe, we will be able to see his encounter with Spidey in future Marvel Studio movies. Then Miles accidentally encounters another version of Spider-Man, Margot Cass, aka Spider-Bite, from Earth 22191, where people spend free time in cyberspace. This has led to the growth of cybercriminals, so Margot, in the guise of Spider-Bite, surfs the net and catches them. Behind the real Margot, you can see a poster Weeby Incognito, with a mask, which is a symbol of the hacker group Anonymous. When Miles encounters Margot, their spider senses synchronize, as they did during the first meeting of Peter and Miles, and when they met other Spideys. However, in Across the Spider-Verse, such synchronization is only shown between Miles and Margot, which may indicate that sympathy has arisen between them, causing jealousy in Gwen, who aggressively urges Morales not to hesitate, and later, when he flirts with Margot, she even uses her web to pull him away from the girl. Then we see the return home machine, which determines to which dimension the DNA anomaly belongs, and sends it back to the right universe. The design of this device resembles a character from the comics, the Great Weaver, who canonically resided at the center of the Great Web and maintained the web of life and destiny in balance. But the name of this machine, Go Home Machine, obviously refers to John Watts' Spider-Man trilogy, where each film contained the word home in its subtitle. Next we have the craziest thing that this movie actually has, because it is related to the prequel, Beyond the Spider-Verse. In the next scene, when they introduce Miguel O'Hara, we see up close as he injects himself with some serum, and here we can guess that this serum is blocking some side effects, because just before that, Gwen mentioned he's like a vampire spider, and we saw how he scared the Vulture with his sharp teeth, like vampires. So this might be medicine, blocking the symptoms of vampirism, but judging by the spider logo on the syringe, it seems like this drug gives him Spider-Man abilities. Canonically, his abilities appeared after gene therapy he did on himself to get rid of his addiction to the drug Bliss, and here they hint that the spider serum is his drug, and if this substance really gives him superpowers, then Miguel is actually an imposter who is not a version of Spider-Man, and this is hinted not only by the absence of his spider sense, but also the absence of a sense of humor, which is an integral part of the character, so Miguel is probably not who he claims to be, and it seems Spider-Punk is already starting to suspect this, because when they enter Miguel's lab, you can see Hobby still in various parts, grabbing whatever he can, and then a message appears on the screens, saying that the memory block has been removed, so this small detail could be significant, as there might be information revealing Miguel's plans. He tells Miles that it stripped you from the truth, but when Miles asks what's that, he replies,
I ain't got Scooby-Doo, mate, because that's what they want.
At the bottom of the screen, there is even a note explaining that it's a rhyme, with the word clue, from the Cockney dialect Hobby speaks. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Doctor Strange already spoke such slang when he sent Spider-Man to catch villains from different universes. And this is very interesting, because in Scooby-Doo, the heroes caught all sorts of supernatural beings, who always turned out to be not who they claimed to be. So this phrase could very well be a hint at such a plot twist. In Miguel's monitors, you can also notice the spot in some bar, and thanks to the art book of the movie, we know it's the bar with no name, a place where villains can gather and relax. In the comics, this bar first appeared in Captain America number 318. It was located in an old abandoned subway station, and all Marvel comic villains used to gather there. In Across the Spider-Verse, we were supposed to see this place up close, but in the end, they cut this scene from the final version. In the lab where Gwen, Miles and Hobby go through, you can see gadgets of various canonical Spider-Man villains. You can see Hobgoblin's claws, Dr. Octavius' tentacle fragments, and the Green Goblin's glider, and between them, there is a robot with tentacles that somewhat resembles the one Professor Mendel Stromm used in the comics to avenge Norman Osborn. In Spider-Man 2099's command center, you can see a new suit being developed by Miguel in the background. Unlike his current suit, this one is white, and it's probably based on the suit from Spider-Man 2099 Volume 3, Number 2, which had rocket boots, a hat wizard, and shot explosive spider-shaped projectiles. We see Miguel getting upset with Miles for breaking a canon event, and then, unexpectedly, the mentor of Miles, Peter Benjamin Parker, appears from the shadows, who became a father after Into the Spider-Verse. After meeting Miles, Peter got along with MJ and decided to have children. Then Miguel starts explaining how the multiverse works, and to visualize it, a timeline branch appears. This image of the multiverse already appeared in the Loki series, after the heroes killed the guardian of the sacred timeline, named He Who Remains. However, Miguel shows that this is the only one-sided view of the multiverse, because there is also a spider web connecting all realities, which Miles immediately names Spider-Verse. This idea came from the game Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, where it was called the Web of Life and Destiny. Then it moved to the comics, where it got its origin. This multiverse scheme was created by a god named Nate, who also created beings that moved through this web and repaired it. These creatures were responsible for maintaining the stability of the web, and they could also undo any creature in any reality with spider abilities, thus creating avatars for themselves in the needed universe, that is, Spider-Man. In the movie, they show us that at the intersections of these threads of the web, there are canon events common to all Spider-Man, like Uncle Ben's death. The first canonical event they show us is the bite of the radioactive spider, which almost all hero variations survived, and of course, there is a moment from Sam Raimi's movie when the spider bit Peter in the museum. Another canon event is the famous kiss of Spider-Man, first shown by Sam Raimi in Spider-Man 2002. Here you can also see his kiss with Gwen Stacy from Spider-Man 3. Another moment from Spider-Man 3 can be seen just a second later, when they show us another canon event, the story when the Spider-Man was possessed by an alien symbiote. And here you can notice a shot when Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker was removing the Venom suit in the church. On the left, you can see an image of Spider-Gwen in the Venom suit, taken from the cover of the third issue of the comic, King in Black, Venom vs. Carnage. Another canon event is the death of Gwen's father, Captain Stacy, and Miguel mentions events from ACM 90, which directly refers to the 90th issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, where the Captain died for the first time, and illustrations from the comic are shown on the screen. Next, Lila shows different versions of Captain Stacy's death, the first of which is the event from Earth 26, 49-6, from the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series. It's noteworthy that this moment wasn't in the series itself, it was cancelled after 2 seasons, where Captain Stacy was alive, so they showed us what potentially should have happened in the continuation. However, here, the character is more detailed than he was in the project, so maybe it's a hint that this story will return to the screens. They also show us the same event in The Amazing Spider-Man, where Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man sits by the dying Captain Stacy, and then come canon events of each of the heroes in the room. Here you can see how Hobby throws away the Spider-Man suit, just like the illustration from the comic Spider-Man No More, where Peter Parker decided to quit his superhero life. This same image was repeated by Sam Raimi in Spider-Man 2, when Peter, following canon event, threw away his suit. Jessica Drew recalls the moment when she finds herself under rubble, referring to the 33rd issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, where Peter Parker found himself in such a situation. This moment was also depicted in the movie Spider-Man Homecoming, when Peter got stuck under the Vulture's warehouse rubble, and a little earlier in this movie was a similar moment when Miles saved the Indian Captain Stacy. Another canon event they show us is Peter's wedding to Mary Jane, and this wedding image is taken from the issue 21 of the Amazing Spider-Man Annual. As for Gwen's events, they don't show us them fully, but her pose reminds us of a moment from the comic arc, The Last Hunt of Kraven, when the poisoned and buried alive by Kraven's Spider-Man rolled out of the grave. Then Miguel tells about how his actions led to the death of one of the universes. He found a reality where his version had a family, but was shot by a criminal. So Miguel took the place of his alternative version and became a family man until this dimension died. In this flashback, the regular version of Spider-Man appears, who is obviously Peter Parker from Earth 616, as Miguel refers exactly to him during the story. Also, you can notice a watch on Peter's hand that allows him to travel through the multiverse, which surely suggests that this story happened after Miguel gathered the spiders to protect the Spider-Verse. After this flashback, Miles realizes that his dad could also die, so he is about to get a promotion to Capitan in a couple of days. Understanding the danger, Miles' spider sense kicks in unexpectedly. Normally, the spider sense warns spiders of danger a second before something happens, but this time Miles sees the future, which will happen in a few days. Spot will try to destroy Earth 1610, causing Jefferson Davis to die. By the way, his death exactly repeats the death of Captain Stacy from The Amazing Spider-Man number 90. He tries to save the boy, but dies under the debris. And as for the fact that the spider sense helps the Spider-Man to foresee the future, they hinted at the beginning of the movie, when Gwen was drumming at the rehearsal. At that time, she was sort of retelling the plot, but in parallel with scenes from Into the Spider-Verse, you could notice spoilers for Across the Spider-Verse. Learning about his dad's impending death, Miles wants to save him, but Miguel tries to persuade him not to. When the conversation turns to Uncle Ben, images of this canon event appear on the screen, where you can also see several interesting scenes. Here you can also see shots from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, moments from the game The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and a flashback from Spectacular Spider-Man when Peter comforted Aunt May after his uncle's death. It's also noteworthy that this episode was called intervention. This term from psychology denotes the intervention of relatives in a person's life whose behavior has become unacceptable. More often than not, relatives or friends of the person being intervened with gather, trying to reach out to him, just like in this scene. So a few seconds later, Miles even asks about it.
Is this an intervention or something?
Even more symbolically, in this scene, Spider-Man from this animated series appears, who even has his own line. But this is not the only return of the hero from the old animated series, because in the background you can also see a version of Spider-Man Unlimited series. In the scene explaining the canon events, several other interesting versions of Spider-Man also appear. There is an unknown version of Spider-Man who looks like Samurai, and next to him is the second version of Spider-Woman, Julia Carpenter. She appeared in comics during the first Secret Wars, and another interesting version of Spider-Woman can be noticed to the right of Miles, a cyborg Spider-Woman, obviously based on the character from issue 21 of the Spider-Man comics series. Spidey was fatally wounded, but he was saved from death by replacing some parts of his body with cyber prosthetics. In the end, Miles decides to save his dad, despite the threat to the multiverse and his friends' pleas. Then Miguel uses a laser trap to stop Morales, against which Gwen protests. However, the only Spider-Man who sides with Miles is Hobie Brown. While all other spiders argue, he reminds Miles of his advice. So the hero follows this advice, disables the trap and runs away. Then all the Spider-Man variants go after Miles, except Hobie, who moves to his dimension. At this moment, you can see a version of Spider-Man in a costume very reminiscent of the villain Shocker. But when Miguel orders the other variants to stop Spider-Man, they don't understand who exactly, and point fingers at each other, repeating the famous meme. This meme became so popular that it migrated to other stories. It was repeated in post-credit scene in Into the Spider-Verse and in No Way Home. Then the chase begins, where you can again see a bunch of interesting Spider-Man variants. Among the variants repeating the meme is one wearing a costume similar to the Velocity suit from the Spider-Man game for PlayStation, only in a different color scheme. Here you can even notice a variant that strongly resembles She-Hulk from the MCU. It is not specified whether this version of the hero has spider abilities. One can assume that she ended up here by breaking the fourth wall, as in the finale of the first season of her series. Trying to escape from Miguel, Miles hides on the back of Max Bourne, Spider-Man from Earth 2211, who was part of organization to prevent timeline breaches, and the muscular girl activating the blue exoskeleton is Anya Corazon, or Spider-Girl, as known from concept art, as such a version did not appear in the comics. To the right of Anya Corazon, there is a round Spider-Man that looks like a Funko Pop figure. In the same frame, there is a Canadian Spider-Girl, which also did not appear in the comics, and from the ceiling hangs a spider wearing a suit, the colors of which are reflected symmetrically. Its body and mask are blue, while its legs and sides are dark red. Apparently, this Spider-Man is a mirror double of Peter Parker. He comes from a story where Dr. Doom created an evil reflection of Spider-Man. One of the variants trying to catch Miles wears the Civil Mark I armor, which Spider-Man created to fight a dangerous criminal group. The cat spider attacking Miles comes from the comic Spider Island, I Love New York City, where all New Yorkers, including cats, gained Spider-Man's abilities and faced off against Venom Pigeon. Then they show us even crazier hero variant, a T-Rex named Peter Parker, introduced in the comics Edge of Spider-Verse Volume 2. It's said that he got his powers after a meteorite containing alien spiders fell. When Miles runs through the cafeteria, you can see that the Spideys mostly eat burgers and fries, just like Peter B. Parker in Into the Spider-Verse. This spider zoo includes Spider-Monkey, a selfish and cruel version of the hero from the Amazing Family comics. And when the heroes fly past Spider-Therapist's office, you can notice a diploma from Ditko University, referring to one of Spider-Man's creators, writer-artist Steve Ditko. During the chase, Miles has a showdown with Patrick O'Hara, parodying Western movies. After that, he is attacked by Werewolf Spider-Man from the Marvel Comics crossover based on Sam Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy. Right after, he faces Charlotte Weber, aka Solar Spider, who suffers from Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. People with a severe form of the disease are forced to use crutches and wheelchairs, just like Charlotte, whose wheelchair transforms into a spider. Solar Spider's canon debut is thanks to a Marvel contest, promising the winner a spot in the third Spider-Verse volume. And the winner was Dana Broder, who suffers from Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. After Charlotte, Miles is attacked by Spider-Man from the 1967 animated series, who Miguel met in the post-credit scene in Into the Spider-Verse. Here you can notice that the character moves very little, repeating the original animation of the series, the budget of which was small, so the creators had to make the hero's animation very simple, using the same assets several times. This is joked about in Across the Spider-Verse, when this version of Spider-Man can't catch Miles due to animation limitations. Then Miles rushes into the training room, where you can see targets shaped like Spider-Man villains in their classic style. They were made by Steve Ditko for collectible images published at the end of various comics, like the Amazing Spider-Man Annual. Here you can notice Rhino, Kraven the Hunter, Electro, Green Goblin, and Dr. Octavius, who says, This line is taken directly from No Way Home, when it was said by Dr. Octopus, played by Alfred Molina.
Hello, Peter.
Another reference to the Marvel Spider-Man trilogy can be seen right after, when one of the Spider-Women hangs between two blocks on her web. This is of course a nod to the scene from Homecoming, when Peter tried to hold together two parts of a ferry, using his web. Apparently, such a situation is also a canon event, and the Spideys are training not to mess up, because not everyone has Iron Man as a friend. In the end, Miles finds himself facing another crowd of Spider-Man. To Miles' left, you can see Jessica Drew in her classic comic book costume. Next to her stands Spider-Man in a stealth suit that can silence sounds and make the host invisible. Hanging from the roof above Miles is the black and white Spider-Man, created specifically for the movie, as the alter ego of music producer Metro Boomin, who recorded the soundtrack for Across the Spider-Verse and voiced his character. You can also see a Spider-Man in a costume similar to Fear itself, from the Marvel Spider-Man game. Not far from him, you can see another costume from the game. During the chase, Gwen tries to tell Jessica something important about Miles. However, Spider-Woman interrupts Gwen and advises her to think with her head, so they never reveal this moment. Most likely, Gwen understands that Miles has a chance to save his father without harming the multiverse, because Miguel's theory about the danger of disrupting canon events may simply be wrong, especially if he's a fraud. When the Spideys chase Miles on the Moon Train, you can see two more interesting Spider-Man variants. Doppelganger, who appeared in the Infinity War storyline as an evil and monstrous copy of Spider-Man, and Spider-Knight from the Ultimate Spider-Man, where he had a Spider-Horser. At some point, Miles starts glitching because he lost the bracelet that allowed him to stay stable in this universe, and for a moment, you can see the hero in a store-bought costume from the previous movie. Eventually, Miles lures almost all the Spideys from the Spider Society and sneaks into an empty building, activating the Return Home machine. However, his plan fails because the machine reads the DNA of Spider-Man from Earth 42, so so Miles is transported to the wrong dimension. Then, an angry Miguel sends Gwen back to her universe, and together with Jessica and Ben Reilly, they go to Earth 1610 to stop Miles. Peter Parker returns home to tuck Mayday into bed. It's worth noting Mayday's toys, as they clearly depict Peter's two main villains, the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus. Spider-Man symbols can be seen on the bedding, and on Mayday's pajamas there is a spider ham depicted. Meanwhile, Gwen returns home and finds out her dad took off her stuff out of the drum and opened her mom's gift, which turned out to be a penguin. Very symbolic, because in the Spider-Ham universe, Gwen was a penguin. Gwen tries to leave through the window. Her dad wants to turn on the light, holding the penguin, but in the reflection it looks like a gun. So Gwen shoots with the web. In response, George Stacy says,
"You wanna go easy on the penguin?"
repeating Peter Parker's phrase to Miguel, where he says to go easy on Miles. So her dad literally tells her to take it easy on herself, because Gwen blames herself for her best friend's death and the betrayal of her dad and Miles. Gwen tells her dad that the spider mask is her badge, echoing her own line from the second issue of Spider-Verse. Then George Stacy says he has decided to resign because he doesn't want to arrest his daughter, and that means Gwen broke the canon event, where her father was supposed to die after becoming a captain. After hugging his daughter, George Stacy gives Gwen a gift from Hobie, a new teleportation device that he built himself. Ironically, when Miles tells Hobie he wants to join the Spider Society to get the watches, he replies,
To get a watch?
Make your own watch.
The watch screen says Project Bootleg. This refers to the times of prohibition in the USA, when bootleggers illegally made and transported alcohol for sale. It hints at illegal movements, bypassing the Spider Society, which we will clearly see in the next movie. The portal opened by these watches is different from the ones we have seen before, and is depicted in the collage animation style from Hobie's universe. And the image on Earth 42 has a dark screen filter in the style of the Matrix, obviously hinting that something is wrong with this universe. As Miles flies through Times Square, he could have noticed a Soda Coca ad, which might have hinted to him that he ended up in another universe if he had been more attentive. In his dimension, soda is called Coca Soda, which is obviously a reference to Coca-Cola. Then, as Miles flies past a billboard for a TV company called Vulture Telecom, it's not just a nod to one of the members of the Sinister Six, but a direct hint that in this universe, Adrian Toomes has its own company. Later, in the Prowler shelter, you can see a news report where J. Jonah Jameson reports that the city is run by the Sinister Six cartel, and they have been hinting at this ever since Miles arrived on Earth 42. All you had to do was pay attention to the billboards all over the city. In this universe, you can see a billboard for a mobile phone manufacturer called Electronics, which, judging by the capital letters, is owned by Electro. Instead of Oscorp, in this universe there is Scorpo, clearly owned by the Scorpion, and on another building you can notice the number 8, so Otto Octavius also has his own business here. Rhino here owns some casino, the sign of which stands out among the New York buildings. But his direct competitor is obviously the Sandman, who runs slot machines and a hotel. In this universe there's also Kraven the Hunter, who isn't part of the cartel, since he's running for mayor. Among the buildings you can see his campaign office, Vote for Kraven, and as you can understand from J. Jonah Jameson news broadcast, the current mayor is Silvermate, who in the comics was a powerful crime boss. All this happened because the radioactive spider that was supposed to bite Miles Morales in this universe due to Kingpin's experiment with his collider ended up on Earth 1610 and bit the wrong hero. As a result, Spider-Man never appeared in this dimension, and there was no one to stop the villains who took over the city. On Earth 42, Jefferson Davis did die, as shown by graffiti drawn by Miles and Aaron in the same spot, where on Earth 1610 there is a portrait of Uncle Aaron. Notice that the graffiti covers two words, Pichelli and Bendis. Those are the names of Miles Morales' creators, writer Michael Bendis and artist Sarah Pichelli. It symbolizes how this reality got rewritten and changed, because the local canon is now in the past. Interestingly, despite the canon event being disrupted, this universe didn't perish, as Miguel claimed, clearly showing his theory was wrong. After Jefferson's death, Miles from Earth 42 was raised by Uncle Aaron, who in this universe passed down the Prowler cloak to his nephew, but don't rush to call them villains. In this universe, they are currently heroes. A test footage online showed them stealing medicine to deliver to a hospital where Rio Morales works. Apparently, pharmaceutical companies on Earth 42 also belong to the Sinister Six. Then Miles knocks out his alternate version, but his spider sense doesn't react, probably because it didn't see himself as a threat. Waking up in the Prowler's hideout hideout, Miles realizes he is tied to the same punching bag where he trained with Uncle Aaron in Into the Spider-Verse, where he also tied up Peter Parker. When Gwen realizes Miles is in the wrong reality, she gathers a team of friends to help find him, including heroes from the previous movie, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham and Penny Parker, as well as new friends from this movie, Hobie Brown, Pavitra Prabhakar and Margot Cass. Gwen's last words hint that the whole movie was her telling a story to one of the Spideys. If you remember the start of this movie, it becomes obvious she was talking about the finale of Across the Spider-Verse, claiming she caused Miles pain. Gwen was telling this whole story of the Spider-Verse to invite someone new into the team, the person to whom the last words are addressed.
You want in?
So guys, it's been a long video, I put many efforts to do this, so I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel, because I'm a bit struggling with subscribers now. Hit the like button and write what you think about it in the comments below. So, we'll see you soon.